Poddin My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Poddin My Noggin. This is our actual 50th episode of our first season, and I can't believe I got here. Now this week, it's just me, so sorry, I'm just going to put up with me. I thought about what I wanted to talk about, and as we're closing out the year with only a few episodes left, I thought that I would talk about my first love. My first love is something that's been with me since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And it's solid and it's steady and it never lies. Actually, that's not true. It does lie. It never misleads. No, it does that as well. Never hurts my feelings. Nope, it makes me cry sometimes. It's solid and it's steady, and it's a love that I've had since, like I said, I was a child, and a love that stayed with me through all these years. They are loyal, if you will. And so what I am talking about are books. Reading is my first love. It is my happy place. It is my therapy. One of the things that I've talked about on the podcast before is that if I'm feeling untethered or in a space where things seem to be, I'm just detached from my body or I'm spiraling or whatever that situation may be, the best thing I can do for myself ever is to sit down and read a book. And I do that often. Now, this year, being a very busy year, work-wise, creative excursion-wise, adventure-wise, I didn't get to read nearly as many books as I would have hoped to. When I filmed my first podcast episode, December 31st last year, I was halfway through my 75th book, and I did not get to finish it before midnight. So I only read 74 and a half books in the year 2023. And this year I'd be lucky if I maybe got close to 30. So less than half of the books that I would normally read. So why do I want to talk about them? Well, I do know that for me, I'm a bookworm, and being a bookworm, I love reading stories, the things that you can discover about yourself in a story, how you react about certain things in a story. And then on top of that, just getting lost, right? Getting, like, when I watch a movie, for instance, I sit down, I watch a movie, and I get lost in that movie. I become a part of its world. I feel, emote, all of that sort of thing. And then at the end, it's over, and I close that sort of chapter of my life, that movie. It was great. And I judge a movie by how it makes me feel. So some movies do better than others because it depends on if it can make me emote. So books are something I love. I know that there are people out there who don't love books or don't love reading, and I find it hard to understand, but to everyone is different. For me, I think a lot back to when I was young, maybe kindergarten age, grade 1, my dad worked in sort of a town that was about an hour or so away from the village that we lived in, the community, really. It was just very small. And I remember, like, every day he'd come home from work, he would have like a new book for me to read, and him and my mom would read those books to me, and I would read them to them. And I think that that's where my love for books have come from. I have very fond memories of those particular times. So for a moment, let's go back to Christmas of last year. And my cousin had purchased me 2 books for Christmas. And these two books were by an author I had never heard of. I never heard about the books, and they were a part of a series that we discovered after I had opened them. And then there was another part of that series that was going to be coming out in June. Now, so the purpose of today's sort of episode, if you will, is talking about books, but to talk about my favorite books from this year, and what I started off the year by reading. So this author that was unknown to me wrote this book, The Housemaid. Her name is Freida McFadden. And, you know, I think it was probably the 2nd or 3rd of January when I sat down and opened this book and started reading. Now, I will tell you that I'm a very fast reader. I don't think it's because I have an high aptitude or I'm special or anything like that. I just think maybe I've trained my brain over the years to devour a book. I can usually read a book like this within maximum 6 hours, 7 hours, but something happens on the in between. So I sat down and I read this book. And I remember having such an emotional reaction to this book. It's a psychological thriller, is how I would classify it. I'm not sure how others would classify it. Yeah, psychological suspense is what it says on the back. And literally, I can't tell you. So if you've not read this book, I'm sure by now you may have heard about it, because this particular book, I found out recently, has been optioned to be made into a major motion picture. So I'm super, super, super excited about this. I'm half hoping that they cast, I think I'm going to say her name wrong, but Amanda Seyfried for this role, because I feel like she could totally be Millie and play that role. Freida McFadden, honestly, I don't even know how to articulate it. She took me on a ride, like a really bumpy ride, so many unexpected twists and turns in this book. And like when I was done reading the book, I remember putting it down and like just sort of like holding my chest, not because I was having pains or anything like that, but it was like I almost felt winded by just the journey that she had brought me on throughout this book. Now, keep in mind that I have the second of her books on the couch with me, okay? And that's the second one. But based on my reaction to this book, I said, okay, I need to give myself like a week or two. I don't know if I can literally pick up another copy. Like, if this is going to be like this book, I don't know if I can pick this up so closely to it. That's how much it like literally took me for a ride, if you will. So I did wait to come down. I remember telling my friends and family about this book in great detail, especially the cousin who had given it to me. And then finally I got around to reading The Housemaid's Secret, which is slightly bigger, not much, but slightly bigger than the first book. And I made the right choice, to be honest with you, because it was another complete and utter ride. Sorry, I'm just having a moment. It's written with in such a way, like I don't know how she can do this. Like it's pen magic. I've reached out to her several times to ask her to come on this podcast, and I'm not going to give up. One day, I will get my opportunity to actually interview or have a conversation with Freida McFadden. And I'm hoping that because she's blowing up and getting really, really big, that I can still, even though I'm just little old me, get an opportunity to talk to her about these books. So that's fine. Read this book. I remember following her on Instagram and sending her messages, which she did respond to, by the way, even comments. So I appreciated that immensely. And yeah, so if you have not read this book or this book, and then we'll skip ahead a little bit, I did get The House Maid is Watching, which was the latest installment, so it came out in the summer, of the Housemaid series, if you will. And it doesn't disappoint, y'all. It's kind of a different speed, different pace, a little bit than the first two, but it's an interest. It does not disappoint because there are still twists and turns. And here's the thing: when someone can truly keep you guessing in a book and like flip your world upside down, I didn't grab it. Okay, I'm a little all over the place, so I'm excited. But they can keep you guessing, and for lack of a better word, mind fuck you at the end of the book. That person's very talented. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, I read somewhere that she's actually a surgeon, is her day job. And I want to know how she went from that to becoming a New York Times bestseller, because she has. And I was watching throughout the year that a bunch of her older books that also became New York Times bestsellers this year, which I was so just happy for and rooting, because it's so good. So, of course, before I had purchased this book in the summer, I was hooked. Like I said, I followed her on Instagram, and then I went and started looking at all of her books. She has about, I think, I'd have to look at my bookshelf. I think I have now purchased every single one of her books. I have about half of them left to read because, as I've told you, I just didn't have the time this year. But the next book that I read by Freida McFadden is this book, The Coworker. Completely different story from this, of course, but heart palpitation from this particular book. Okay, heart palpitations. And she really gets you. She really gets you like right into between the rib cage, and I'm not giving things away because I want you to go out and read them. If you enjoy psychological suspense, things that just sort of like rock your world, make your mind go, Freida McFadden. So The Coworker was a really interesting book. The whole thing, the whole story from start to finish, the people involved, the twist of the people involved, the unlikely web that you don't see coming, those connections that you're like, oh my God, what? What? So, The Coworker, okay? Now, I didn't grab it off my bookshelf, and I regret doing it right now, but there was a book that she also wrote, and it's called The Teacher. That one made me have to take like several month break from Freida McFadden, just for my poor heart. And if you're going to read any book by Freida McFadden, just based solely on my experience, go with The Teacher. Yeah, because it is mindfucky on a whole different level. Let me tell you an actual story about that book. So I read that book once again in one sitting, was completely in it, loved every minute of it, and it was fantastic. And I remember finishing the book and was just like, holy cow. And so then I went about my evening and did what I had to do, and then went to bed and like woke up the next morning, and I'm like, I know I'm in the kitchen. I think I'm making a coffee, but it's later in the day, like a midday coffee. And I'm standing in the kitchen. So I've been up now since 6, and this is probably like 12:30, 1 o'clock. And I'm just standing at the coffee machine. And I remember and I think it was the coffee machine. I remember having something in my hands, being over in the corner where my coffee machine lived. So it was most likely like the coffee machine. But whatever I was doing, I stopped completely because something clicked inside my brain. Um, and my jaw dropped. And I just remember saying the name Jay. That's it. That's all I'll give you. And I stood there in this moment of like, I would honestly, like, I think there was so much going on in that moment. Like, it hit me later. I was shocked that um, I hadn't caught it before. I was shocked that it was like something that my subconscious was still processing, 24 hours later. I was just shocked about everything. So shocked. I remember stopping what I was doing, going and finding my phone, and then picking up my phone, logging onto Instagram, going to my DMs where we had exchanged a few messages before. And I was like, oh my God, I just finished reading The Teacher. And I said something to her, including the word J. And I'm like, mind blown. I can't even. And she hearted it, which I think is just still fantastic. I really appreciate that she takes the time to read some of her messages, and she hearted that. It was like the validation that I needed. Because I'm like, no one else is going to understand what just happened to me in my kitchen. But the teacher, and the reason I say the teacher is because of that experience and because of the experience I had with all of the emotions while reading it. But yeah, so the teacher, the housemaid, any book actually I think you pick up by Freida McFadden is not going to disappoint, especially if you're into psychological suspense. And even if you don't know if you are, start with the housemaid. No, start with the teacher. Oh, see, now I'm really... Either one. Pick either one. Oh, see, it's really hard. It's really hard. Because the stories are so different. Like, completely different. But so good. Anyway, Freida McFadden has taken over my life in 2024. I read another one of hers that I thought was incredibly well written. And the ending, if that's... She really kills you in the ending. Maybe she's a heart surgeon, and I don't know what type of surgeon she is. I have to Google that actually. Maybe she's a heart surgeon and she's trying to drum up business, right? Give me palpitations, I have a coronary infarction or whatever it is, and I have to go see her to get fixed up. Such a great book. So in 2024, like I said, I've purchased, I believe, I will check again in 2025, every single copy of what Freida McFadden has written. So, in addition to that, Freida McFadden has most definitely taken over my 2024, as I mentioned already. And she will be a main character energy in my 2025 as well. So, I should probably never see this podcast, but if you're out there, Miss Freida McFadden, if you ever want to send an advanced reader copy to Poddin My Noggin's house, CK Sims, let me know, and I would gladly read your book and give you massive shout outs for your work. There's two other books I want to talk about in this podcast. It's just a short podcast today, but I want to go back to another book that I really enjoyed this year that kind of shaped the last part of my year, and that is Matt O'Neill's Good Mood Revolution. It is not fiction. It is really a roadmap and a pathway to moving yourself out of bad moods into good moods, and igniting the power of conscious happiness. Because I think happiness is a choice as well. It's how we view everything, our mindset, all of those components. So, Good Mood Revolution. It just came out on December 17th. You should absolutely get yourself a copy and be in a good mood in all of 2020-25. 2020-25, you hear me? Other book I want to actually talk about is South of the Yangtze by Flora Chiang. Sorry, I remember that. She was another guest on my show, but I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Um, I had advised her in the beginning that when I first picked it up and started reading it, the first chapter, and I don't believe it was the second chapter, it was later in the second chapter, maybe the third chapter, that really drew me in the most. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book about, just language in general. It's about growing up south of the Yangtze in China during the one child only rule. Absolutely beautifully, breathtakingly written, and I couldn't recommend it enough to people who read it, want to read a book that is about a different culture. And I think that that's what I loved about this book so much, is how this individual painted the characters and showed us different components and elements of their culture that we don't get to see often. And it is so well done. So well done. So I will recommend you to read South of the Yangtze as well. I would be remiss if I did not include another book that I have read probably 100 times. And one, in fact, that I actually wrote as well. It is called Life and Stitches by C.K. Sims. It is such, I think, a cute and adorable young adult story, really, to be honest with you. The ending I love. It was written originally in 2014. It was like over a decade ago. Well, originally it was written in 2008, actually. It was half published in 2013-14, and I ripped it back because I was afraid. And then I decided last year to go into the story, do some rewrites, add some character depth and development, and really re-release it and give it its proper life. And the first part of my year really was spent going through all of the different chapters and the different stories. And honestly, I do love the story so much. And I'm not biased because I wrote it. I just kind of like that story. I think it's really cute. I think that it shows a bit of an underdog. It shows depth in how sometimes people can be selfish when trying to achieve their goals. It shows drama and adventure and all of these things. And it's not really what I would say rooted in like complete reality, to be honest, but it really reads like a movie. And I think that that's how my brain works when I'm writing, is that I see it play out in my brain as a movie, and then I try to create that in the book. Now, I'm not the best writer in the world. I would consider myself a storyteller, not a writer. But you have to write to tell your stories if you want them to come out in a book that you can put on a bookshelf. This particular cover was really special for me. It was designed by Rebecca Carrier, and she's a brilliant artist and designer. And the whole concept that I gave her was I wanted it to look like quilts with the little patches. And so she designed each of these little patches. And they all represent something within the book. And I totally love this book so much, just because it was something that I worked really hard on. And saw come to life. So that is my episode today on books. I would love to hear about what books you read in 2024 and what books you plan to read in 2025. And if you have book recommendations, let me know, because I'm totally always open to reading a good book recommended by someone, and especially if they tell me parts of why they loved this book, not necessarily what happens in the book, but part of the emotions that they might have experienced during that book, because that really makes me be like, okay, if I read this book, will I have similar reactions? And I love the diversity in that. Like sometimes one person can read a book and another person can read a book and they have completely different experiences. And that is very much about what life all is, really, is everybody's individual perception of what is happening in front of them. So that's my show for today. Freida McFadden ruled my 2024. She probably will rule my 2025 unless y'all get me onto another author that takes up rent-free space in my brain. So yeah, hit like and subscribe. Follow along. We're going to be moving into season 2 in the beginning of 2025. And thank you, as always, for tuning in and watching. And I appreciate all of you. Happy holidays, everyone. And get out there and live your wildest dream.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.